All right, class, welcome to your first recorded class lecture. As promised, we're going to talk today about the personal narrative. I'm going to give you some additional insight in terms of how you want to create your writing or how you want to style your writing so that your writing is most effective for this genre. If you recall, this genre relies heavily on pathos, so your writing style has to be a little bit different. It has to speak to a person's emotions, and that's what this lecture is meant to show you. So, I've gone over the requirements briefly for the personal narrative with you when we had our call through Zoom. Now today in this PowerPoint, we're going to learn about these different techniques that can make your essay most successful. Now remember, for next class, what I'm asking you to do is read Ragnarok Boy and complete the discussion. And also review the agreement video, which I'm going to just tack on to the end of this video so that you can watch it all in one fell swoop, and I'm going to try to go quickly, and then complete the related quiz. And again, shoot to have this done for next class, but as I said, if you get too busy with the stuff that you have and trying to navigate your online classes, it's okay if it's not done right away. I just don't let it pile up because you're going to be drowning in work and you're not going to successfully move through the course. So I'll touch back with you on that later, but shoot to have those things done for next class. So we can't do this warm-up exactly, but you certainly could pause or kind of imagine your way through this. You're probably by yourself right now because you're not really allowed to be with other people. But if you have a sibling or a parent or a friend that's with you wherever you're at right now, you could try this in your journals. Pick that person sitting nearest to you and just spend a couple of minutes telling them what you did this morning. Maybe you got up and went for a walk around your neighborhood, then came back home, made toast, and started checking your emails to figure out what your classes were going to be, and that's what you say. Now, the second part of this is the important part. In your journals or, on a scrap sheet of paper, I want you to think about what you just told your friend. Take what you've told them now, and instead of telling them in your writing, I want you to show the person what you did. You don't have to share with them this piece of writing, but I want you to sit there, and if you went for a walk this morning, rather than saying, I went for a walk, show us. Use sensory details to help us go on that walk with you. What did you see? What did you smell? What did the air feel like? What was the sound of your shoes hitting the pavement as you walked down the street? Little details like that. That's what's going to bring your writing to life. So as I said, if needed, you can pause here and go ahead and complete this exercise. Now, for this, I did one of these for you. I want to stress here the importance of showing versus telling. When you're writing your personal narrative, and really this is true for all types of creative writing, it's just that the personal narrative or the personal essay falls under this genre. When you're writing creatively, you are attempting to reach a person on an emotional plane. So you have to show them what you want them to see. You can't just tell them. You can't just summarize or put into plain terms. Imagine that you are directing a movie of your life or of moments from your life. What do you want that person to see? From what camera angles are you shooting? What items are you focusing in on? How do you want them to experience what's happening? You can control all of that through your words and through how you basically present information. So you can see here that I did one of these. So for example, if I were to tell you, this, by the way, is not what I did this morning, but this was true one day. I woke up at 5 a.m. and went for a jog while it was still foggy and dark. The fog was really thick and it was hard to see. Okay, great. I could tell you that. That's what I did. That is what I did on a different day. But if I want to show you and I want to use my words and I want my writing to convey exactly what my experience was like, I need to add more sensory detail. So here's how I changed that when I sat down to write it out. Ting, ting, ting. The shrill sound of my morning alarm pierced the cold air. 5 a.m. comes way too soon, I thought, as I tried to shake the sleep from my body. I quickly rose, slipped on my thickest athletic leggings, favorite Nikes, and my Columbia jacket before slipping out the front door without waking any children. I exhaled, and the frost from my breath snaked through the air. This morning was cooler than usual, and fog hung unmoving, like a rigid valance draped as far as the streetlight illuminated. So here you see, and by trade, I do really enjoy creative writing, and that's where I focused in my master's. But I took those details, and I decided to infuse more of a tone with them. So you notice I gave sounds. I included internal thoughts. I showed you what I was doing, what I was wearing. I let you kind of see the cold air, or the cold breath snaking through the air, so you had a sense of like what it felt like. All those different details are there. Just think about, where can I engage my senses, and how can I use my senses to make this really tangible for my reader? Because it's when the reader can place themselves in your shoes and feel like they're standing there with you, they're more likely to be empathetic towards you. So that's how pathos works. So try that out on your own. The next thing I want to look at is understanding the difference between scene and showing. So that's kind of what we talked about. But when you're piecing together a narrative, okay, so if you're telling, like, let's say, the story of when you broke your ankle playing volleyball and how that changed your life. You know, from the moment that injury happens until today, there were a lot of scenes. Like, life has been happening for maybe 5 years. You can't possibly tell us the entire story from beginning to end. So you have to choose certain moments that you think contribute to whatever your message might be. So it's important to understand which moments do I zoom in on. What does my reader need to see to understand what my greater point is? And sometimes when students are writing, when writers are writing, we just start writing everything down and we have too many scenes, or we just kind of get lost. So your story needs to be expertly arranged. In other words, you want to make sure that you have only the scenes that you need and that all are powerful and affect your overall message and support it that way. So something that I like to do, this is just a trick that I found along the way that works really well to help me organize where my writing will go, because sometimes I do like to pre-plan. What I do is when I have a story idea, or an essay idea, like in this case, I think about, okay, well, what was the chain of events? And you can see, maybe not so well because this was bad color choices, but you can see down here, I just use little arrows. Like, you could have listed this, you could have bulleted this, you could have even just done a fast write and maybe written a small paragraph, but I listed out the different moments that I thought comprised my story. Okay. And naturally, the stuff that you write down is all going to be important. There was other stuff naturally that occurred between these moments, but the ones that you're choosing to write about are all going to have some kind of emotional weight because they are what comes to mind first. So I was working on an essay that talked about when my father got sick, and like what happened immediately after I got the phone call, and like just all of that kind of thing. So I decided it was important for me to begin my story the day before because I had this kind of like bad feeling. And then I started listing like, okay, and then after I got that call, here's all the stuff that happened. And I listed it all out. Then I went back and I looked at, okay, now that I can see all of this, I definitely want all of this in my story, but which moments are so important that I actually want to slow down and show them to the reader as opposed to just giving them summary or telling them. So that exercise I was suggesting in the beginning, where you tell somebody something versus showing them something, this is what I'm talking about. You can't possibly show your entire story either because you would end up with a book. You have to balance these things. So I know you probably can't read it, but when I went back and looked at the series of events that I was going to detail in my essay, the ones highlighted in yellow are the ones that I elected to zoom in on. Those are moments where I got into that kind of cinematic quality. I had a whole lot of sensory image working for me. I had dialogue. I had more description than I would in maybe some of these other scenes. Some of these other scenes would be like, I'm just telling here kind of what happened between this and this. But when I get to these junctures, I know this is where I'm going to resonate most with my reader, so I really have to take them into the scene. So I have an exercise here for you. Again, you can hit pause, or you can maybe just bookmark this and come back to it later when you begin working on your personal narrative. But I do find this is a really helpful thing to balance your scene and your summary. Do the same thing I did is essentially what I'm asking you to do. Consider what you want to write about for your narrative. List out all the events, and then look at the events more critically and decide which specific moments do you need to slow down and make into a scene, and which others can you just simply summarize or tell what was going on. So try that on your own. Now, I talked briefly about characters and setting, and that might sound odd because you're thinking like, I'm not creating the story, they're not characters, but you still have to write those real people who were in your life, in your story, and you have to figure out how you can make them in an authentic way. So they are kind of like characters. To be respectful of them and to try to have the way you create these real life individuals, to have them appear as real life characters, you have to consider, okay, how would they have said this? What did they say? Am I being true to their spirit? So definitely ask yourself that. If you have dialogue, let's say, with a teammate, look at the dialogue you've created and say, is this really how it happened? Does this sound like that other person? And do your best. You know, you're never going to remember everything that another person said, or even everything that you said word for word. So just try to capture the spirit of it. And this might be a situation where, depending upon, you know, how much you want to dig into this, you might want to call this person on the phone and say like, hey, do you remember this day? Could you tell me what you remember from it? Like, what did you say? What did I say? And just maybe see if they can give you some additional insight. It's one option. The other component here is setting. So you may or may not think setting is important, but if you look at some of your most favorite writers, your most favorite creative writers, and even essayists, one thing they know how to do is utilize setting to help infuse tone. So I give you this example here. Setting is important. You know, like if you're, and I've had students in the past write about maybe like going to visit grandparents or spending time with grandparents before they passed. Oftentimes setting is really, really integral to that person. So here I give you the example of like describing your grandparents' old house using cheerful and bright descriptions to match your grandmother's loving personality. If you are, you know, writing a story about losing your grandmother and you're trying to remember her, maybe you have a moment where you flash back to when you were a child, maybe you share a memory where you're walking up, I don't know, like the tulip-lined sidewalk to their red front door, and you can smell cookies, the scent of cookies like wafting through the open windows, and just those like kind of cheery, homey vibes. You can use setting to help us understand your characters, to help us understand how you're feeling in different moments in your story. So setting is a really powerful tool that you can, I don't want to say manipulate, but yeah, kind of manipulate so that it mirrors what you want the reader to understand. I haven't said this yet today in this little lecture here, but it's important that when you are writing a personal narrative, that you don't come out and say everything, that you hint at things, and like using your setting, using your descriptions, choosing the right words with the appropriate connotations. Those are ways that you can hint at what you're trying to say without having to be so overt and saying, okay, here's the point of my narrative. So, that being said, rough draft is going to be due 1 week from today, March 24th. Pardon me. I am still recovering from this illness that I've had like for 2 months, but it's almost better, I promise. So let's see, rough draft due next week. We talked earlier. I think that I'm not going to have you peer review this one. Number one, to save you some work and headache, but number two, because students sometimes will write about very personal issues, and I don't want you to feel like you can't write about those things because other people are going to see them and see that it's your story. So we'll just keep it. The only person who will see it is me, and God knows I will not judge you at all, and you can share whatever you feel comfortable sharing with me, and that's totally fine. But if you have any questions about any of this, please let me know. I am going to switch then over to my other PowerPoint. We'll try to go through that briefly. I'm trying to keep these short for you because I know you guys have stuff to do. Let's get into it. I don't want to start there though. Alright, so this is agreement part 1. We are going to look at what agreement is and how it works in language and how you can have correct agreement in your writing. Keep working on your storyboards. Yeah, I put this in here for myself yesterday, but we've kind of decided we're not going to do peer reviews for the personal narrative. So, quiz, storyboards, read Ragnarok Boy. I think you got it. All right, I'm going to play this for you. I don't know how this is going to work, but we'll see. This was a video that another group of students did a couple years ago, so you can check this out.
Hey, what's up, cutie?
Oh, not much. I'm just walking to the city for a party with friends tonight. You two is going?
Don't you mean are we going? Because the subject is supposed to agree with the verb.
Yeah, that is what I means.
You did it again. You should say that is what you mean.
Oh, silly me. Well, you girls want to go to the party at 7 p.m.?
Yeah. Here's our numbers.
Okay. I got 2 of them who is going to party.
Where is he? I'll get that. Maybe it's him.
2 girls is on the ground.
Don't you mean 2 girls are on the ground? What is it with you guys and bad grammar lately? I'm calling my dad.
We is against grammar. All correct language will be vanishing by us.
Okay, 1, you should say we are against grammar. All correct language use will be banished. And 2,
Bring, 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 bring. Give iPhone.
The way you should say that is give me the phone.
Hello? Put my daughter on the line. I don't know who you are or what you want. I don't know how much money. But what I do have is a special set of skills I have acquired over a colorful career. Grammar skills, the likes of which you have never seen. If you return my daughter and her friend, that will be it. But if not, I will find you, and I will correct your grammar. Good luck. He are never finding me and you.
Use is, not are.
Shut it! I knew it. I knew I would find you. You know, I gave you an option, but you did not take it. Your terrible grammar was an embarrassment to the language. Subject-verb agreement. That's English 101 and Teachers College.
Dad?
If you don't want to be hunted down by me, research how to use proper grammar today, or ask your English teacher. Subject-verb agreement means that you have to use the verb and that agrees with the subject.
Look me in my face, I ain't got no words.
Alright, so that was a cute little example of how some agreement issues could arise. These are some of the things we'll look at today. Maybe not the easiest to follow lesson, but it was a cute little spoof of the movie Taken with Liam Neeson. So we'll jump into this and try to go through it pretty quickly. If you have any questions afterwards, let me know. One of the things that we want to make sure agrees is tense. So that means using the same verb tense in your sentences, your paragraphs, or sometimes even larger sections of writing. It just depends on, what it is you're trying to do, so it could vary. Now, I made these like really simple examples just to highlight or underscore what I'm talking about. She looked at the houses as she walks. Okay, what's wrong with that? Well, looked is past tense, walks is present tense. You have to say looked and walked or looks and walks. It's a no-brainer. But you might be thinking, okay, well, why are we even discussing this? This next sentence, I actually said, I opened the garbage can lid. There I find my keys. Now, to give this some context, several years back, I was running late, I think, to get onto campus, and I had to take my son to daycare, and could not find my keys, which is a pretty common thing. But I was looking everywhere, and I was like, oh my gosh, we have to go. My husband was traveling, and I was on the phone with him, and I was recounting this story because I was so frustrated, and I went to throw like a diaper away, and when I opened the garbage can lid, my keys were sitting there on top of everything. My son had picked them up and thrown them in there. But when I recounted the story to my husband, I started off in past tense, like opened, but when I got to the good part, I find I was in present tense, and I caught myself doing it, and I was like, oh, this is an example, that I could use in real life. We have a tendency to do this all the time, especially when we're telling stories. Most speakers will start off in past tense because they know the story has happened, it's in the past. And once the story ramps up, or once that person gets to a spot where they're trying to remember things just as they were, when they start trying to relive the story themselves to tell it, they will unknowingly switch into present tense. It just happens. We don't even think about it, but it's very common, and you will see this. You will see this happen when you start to write your personal narratives. Look for it. I mean, I'll be looking for it, but you want to be on the lookout for it. It's just a natural phenomenon that you just have to be aware of and make adjustments as needed. So there's that. And then lastly, consistent tense. I wanted to point out, you should know this. This was stuff you learned, I'm sure, in elementary school. When you have a compound subject, this is two nouns joined by and, you treat them as a plural subject. So Jim and John, because they're plural, they hope that their application to main campus will be accepted. This should be pretty easy to follow, but I only call this out to you because in Agreement Part 2, we look at a similar but slightly different situation where we don't follow the same set of rules. So just wanted to kind of refresh that. Now, I know you have not yet written your personal narrative, so this discussion point of imagine rewriting your personal narrative in a different tense, I want you to try that. When you get your personal narrative draft underway, just grab a paragraph, especially a paragraph where maybe you're spending a lot of time on scene or showing. If you've written that in past tense, try it in present tense. If you've written it in present tense, try it in past tense. Just flip-flop them. And then I want you to read it and say, okay, do I like this better, or is this not as effective, and consider why. Sometimes you won't know until you try something more than one way, which is best for you. Now, the next area we're going to look briefly at is this idea of consistent number and person. So we want these things to agree. So the general rule of thumb is that when you're writing, you want to maintain the same number, so like whether something is plural or singular, and maintain the same point of view. So point of view first, second, third. So I give you some, for instance, if you select a gender of some type of noun that could be engendered either way, just kind of run with that gender. So like if you say an athlete must train hard to maintain her performance, even if they maintain a strict training schedule, their nutrition cannot be ignored. This they, this there now isn't in agreement with what happened here. So you'd want to say even if she maintains a strict training schedule, her nutrition cannot be ignored. So you see I fixed it down here. You also want to be careful that you don't shift between tenses, going between second person and third person, they and you. Here we go. Students have to be careful of what they say. So third person, plural, student, this pronoun they refers back to students. You never know who will see what you post. Again, this is another one of those weird phenomenon that just sometimes when we are speaking or we are writing, when we offer up examples, we move between third person, we sometimes slip into second person, we even sometimes do first person plural. It's crazy. You just have to be on the lookout for it. Just be aware that it happens. Here I have students have to be careful of what they share on social media. They never know who will see what they post. Now, I don't have you in front of me to ask, but many of you were probably taught that if you have a singular noun, like teacher, then your pronoun needs to be singular. I bet many of you were taught this. I was taught that. So look, this sentence here, I have correct the following. A teacher always seems to favor their star students. Is that correct, or should it be changed? Now some of you might be thinking, okay, well, teacher is singular, so we need to have a singular pronoun. It should probably be like his or her star students, right? Because that was acceptable a few years back. We wanted to make sure that we weren't saying his students or her students. We wanted to represent everybody, so we would say his or her. Now, in the last 5 years or so, this rule that was true for a very long time, that if you have a singular noun, you need a singular pronoun, which this isn't, it has shifted. And, you know, if I had you in person, we'd have kind of a lengthier discussion about this. But even like back in the 50s, the correct way to write this would be a teacher always seems to favor his star students. It would have been his because that was just the default gender. Not saying that teachers could only be he, it was just that he or his, him, the male gender pronouns were what were universally used. That was just the rule. Then, in like the 70s and 80s, with the advent of women's liberation, women's rights, there was a shift. So, you know what's funny? The trends we see in language, they reflect cultural trends and societal trends. So the shift from his was his or her. So this would have been a teacher always seems to favor his or her star students. So in the last 5 years, because his and her are actually kind of limited definitions when it comes to gender, defining genders and pronouns that are acceptable, we have other pronouns now. They don't cover everything. So the best, easiest, and most concise way to ensure that we are covering any possibility would be to use their. So this is now acceptable. Seem to favor their star students. Okay, let's look at the next one. A reader often gravitates towards certain genres depending on their interests. You have to know which genres you prefer. So, what's wrong with that? Well, reader is singular. Then when we get to the second sentence, we have this you. You have to know which genres you prefer. Therein lies the problem, right? The switch from third person to second. So how do we fix that? Well, you have a few different ways. Number one, the easiest thing to do would probably just be put it all in third and change that you to they, or readers have to know what genres they prefer. That would be the easiest way. You might also notice that this is a reader and we have their interests, so singular, plural. This is okay, but again, if you just want to clear it up and you just don't want to have to, maybe it bothers you to have to blend a singular noun with a plural pronoun, you could just change this from a reader to readers. That's going to be your easiest way. So then readers gravitate as opposed to gravitates. Last example, whether one knows it or not, we are all in this together. One, we. So we've got third person singular, we've got first person plural, has to agree. Whether we know it or not, we are all in this together, or whether one knows it or not, they are all in this together. Very, very good. Let's keep on moving. Now, parallelism. You may or may not have heard of this term. This is an important term, especially for higher level writing. Parallelism is the idea of balancing similar words, clauses, or phrases. And most commonly, when we look at parallel structure, it has to do with how we list our infinitives and our gerunds. Just to touch back on this, an infinitive is the root form of a verb with the word to in front of it and its complements. And a gerund is a verb ending in ing that behaves as a noun. So walking is a gerund. To read is an infinitive. So in parallel structure, you want to make sure that the way you express things is universally the same, because it creates like a nice balance or even expression. So in the sentence here, I prefer walking on sunny days and to read when it rains is not parallel, because we've got one gerund, one infinitive. You hopefully can just see that right off the bat. So you would want to say, I prefer walking on sunny days and reading, or you could say I prefer to walk and to read. You just want to make them the same, equal expression. Same here. Run, jump, and swimming should be run, jump, and swim, or running, jumping, and swimming. How about this one? This is a little more tricky, because your typical instances of parallel structure or problems with parallel structure won't be this simple. Regular exercise can lead to increased energy, weight loss, and improves cardiac health. Now, what I like to do when I'm trying to figure out parallel structure, especially like if I can tell that something isn't parallel but I'm not sure how or why, I will look at what is being listed and I will actually write it out. And if I were with you, I would write this on the chalkboard and explain this a little bit more visually. But I would write out increased energy. Below that, I would write weight loss. And below that, I would write improves cardiac health. And even if you don't remember or can't identify parts of speech because you've done that so long ago, it's all gone from your memory, you can still look at this list of these items and try to figure out, are they the same? Are they being expressed the same way? So if you were looking at this, you would see, okay, increased energy. Energy is a thing. This is a descriptor. Okay, got it. Weight loss is a thing. Improves cardiac health. Well, improves, that's like the result of something, so that's more action-based. So, thing, action. Not the same. See, you don't even need to know parts of speech. You just have to, use basic reasoning. So when you see things lined up that way, it'll easily tell you, okay, this guy is what's different. So easiest way to fix this, we're going to take improves and change it to improved cardiac health. So now improved is our adjective. It's defining the type of cardiac health. It's improved cardiac health. And then our structure is perfectly parallel. All right, and you can see I did the same thing here. I told my students that they should study hard for their first test, ask lots of questions beforehand, and to do all homework assignments as scheduled. Hopefully, you should be able to see, and if you're not, you line these up, you write out what you're listing. You want to write out, study hard, ask lots of questions, and to do all homework. Well, we threw in this infinitive in the final item that was listed that breaks from the structure we have. So we're just going to remove that, and very simply, now we've achieved parallel structure. You guys can try this on your own. Can you fix this statement? This is going to be trickier. I made this one the hardest of all. Let me know, I don't know, maybe I'll ask you in a follow-up if you were able to correct it, or maybe I'll do something fun like give you an extra credit opportunity if you can correct it properly. The key to staying healthy is eating nutritious whole foods, plenty of water, and to get at least 20 minutes of physical activity every single day. So you tell me if you can correct that. All right, the last thing we're going to look at, special constructions. So special constructions are, when it comes to parallelism, basically like a template that we use when we're designing sentences. Like we have certain words that always kind of work together when we're expressing ideas, and these are them. Both and, either or neither nor, not only but also, and then rather and than. So you can see here, when you are balancing ideas using these special constructions, you want to make sure that your parallel structure is in place, because the way you say one thing here should be the same way you say it here. Example: both hiking when the crocuses bloom and to search for morels in spring are favorite pastimes of mine. Okay, well, what's wrong with that? We have a gerund, then we have an infinitive. So we would want to say both hiking when the crocuses bloom and searching for morels in spring are favorite pastimes of mine. There you go. Neither nor, either or. Pokemon Go will not recognize either stopping too far from a Pokestop or to drive more than 10 miles per hour looking for Pokemon. Alright, so we have stopping and then to drive. We already know we're mixing gerunds and infinitives. We have to make them both the same, so I elected to go stopping, driving. Totally fine. Hopefully you get the idea here. I don't think I'm going to show you any more of these. I think this is pretty self-explanatory. Let me know if you have any questions. I appreciate your listening today. And for right now, I just want you to work on the assignments that I've given you. Try to complete them for Thursday, and then I will post more content for you Thursday to review. And if you have questions or if you want to meet up again and have a Zoom video conference, we will certainly do that. So let me know how I can help. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I will see you soon. Bye, guys.